what I love most about having these conversations on the podcast is actually when guest comes back again. And Josh, today's guest, we had our first conversation back in 2020, and then we had a number of other offline conversations. And Josh has exploded a full comp podcast, great conversations over there, and doing lots of other new things. And we're just talking about before we went live here. It's 5 years almost since we connected, and the world have changed. If not once, twice.
At least.
More. Yeah.
For sure. And we've changed a lot as well.
A bit less hair and a bit more
right.
gray.
It's a little lighter than it was before.
So actually Josh and I was talking a couple of weeks ago, and then I said, we need to have a conversation about, what you learned as a business owner about yourself, the industry, and also the work you're doing now. We're actually helping restaurateurs to achieve 50% on the bottom line. And people would think impossible in this new world we live in, with all the cost has exploded, all the challenges around traction and so on. So we're going to come back to that in a moment. But I actually wanted to hear, what have you actually been up to since last time? Just to give, if anyone that's listening in, they actually listen to the first one, episode number 63. I think we talked about setting yourself up for long-term success was like the thought pattern in that, or the red line in that. And what kind of big revolutions have there been from your side?
Well, I mean, you flash back to, let's say, April of 2020 or March of 2020, very beginning of March. And my plan was more restaurants. I already owned a bunch and multiple tiers of dining. I was just going to do more of that. But when the pandemic happened, and I actually had time to stop, I realized I was burnt out. I was exhausted, and subsequently sold the restaurant group, not because I didn't think we were going to make it, but because I was worried that we were. And I didn't know if I had enough gas left in the tank to get it done. I had a 1-year-old daughter at home. I had my wife who, candidly, I mean, for the entire time we had been together, I had been a restaurateur. So we didn't even really know each other. And so right around the time that we had spoken, full comp was off to the races. We got a lot of audience really quick, a little through strategy, more through good fortune. And as the show grew, people started reaching out and they said, "Hey, you sound like you're not an idiot. What do you have to sell me? How can you help me?" And I didn't have anything, Michael. I had nothing to sell people. But I thought that was an interesting idea, and I felt like maybe I did have enough value to offer. So it took a year, and I went to a coach of coaches, because I think that knowing a lot is worth very little. Being able to translate that information to other people in a way that they can internalize it and use it to benefit their lives is not a talent, it's a skill. And so I wanted to learn the skill. So I took a year to build out a full-scale program that it wasn't to help everybody. Candidly, it was to help me when I needed it most, and there were no solutions available. And so that ultimately became the restaurant scaling system. And since launching, we've run hundreds of restaurateurs globally through the program. And I'll share this with you because I think it speaks to your question. What is most interesting to me is sample size. I was a good restaurateur. I mean, I was Michelin awarded. So I was a good, maybe better than average restaurateur. But I became great. I became exceptional when I began to coach other people, just because I have a larger sample size. Like as an owner, I had 3 concepts and multiple locations for those concepts, small sample size. But now I know what works across multiple tiers of dining globally, because I've spent half a decade figuring it out. And so that, to me, and I'm sure you feel the same way, is probably the most interesting part of this whole thing. Is I probably learned more about being a restaurateur in my life post restaurateur than I did while I was actually in it.
And one thing is, you invest in yourself, you went on this course, but I don't know, is there's also that element of getting up in the helicopter and actually allowed to be there, because that's suddenly what you pay for. You pay for strategy in principle.
Absolutely. It's, and then there are a few paradigm shifts along the way that served me well as a restaurateur, that served me well as a consultant. People bring me in to fix what's broken in their businesses. And candidly, I have no interest in that. What I think is more interesting and more productive for them is to figure out what's working in their businesses. Because if we double down on that, if we 10x those efforts, they're going to get a lot more out of doubling business on Fridays and Saturdays than they are on trying to pack the house on a Tuesday night. So for me, it was this way in my own businesses and still to this day. I'm very sensitive to momentum. I look for it because I think the momentum is probably the most powerful thing we have. And I think that it's very easy to capitalize on once you have conditioned yourself to look for it.
Talk a bit about momentum, because that's really interesting, because I think lots of business owners and people I meet, and I think we all done this mistake as we're learning on the internet, is that we forget to look for the momentum, but we believe so much in the idea that we continue banging on, keeping this restaurant open or this idea alive, but actually it's never gaining momentum. So actually you should go somewhere else and find a momentum if it's a new business, new idea. But actually the momentum bit is really the critical bit we forget to look at, because we're so much in love with this project.
Dude, I have the conversation constantly. I ask people, let's get close to the money. Where do you make your money? How do you make your money? But people don't think in those terms. They're like, we're at $50,000 a month. We need to get to $80,000 a month. And I'm like, well, okay, where are you making all of that money? On the weekends. So we need to focus on the weekdays. And I'm like, well, are you capped out on the weekends? Do you have more capacity? Could we throw a few more tables and chairs in there? Is there a way to optimize your floor plan to shrink turn times? Could we see 300 covers instead of 250 covers on a Saturday? Could we do that on Friday too? Everyone has untapped potential. Everybody has capacity they're just not touching. In my fast casual concept, mine, the one that I owned, we were panhandling for business. We had opened in a food hall that, as it turns out, was the place that all great restaurant concepts go to die. And we were dying. We were struggling every day. And so we were like, hey, let's do these promos to convince people to come in for lunch. But the truth is, it was a horrible food hall. Nobody wanted to eat there. So what did we do? I looked for momentum. We had gotten a couple of big catering orders. And it saved the week. A couple of them saved the month. They were significant catering orders. So rather than trying to convince more people to come in for lunch or more people to order on an Uber Eats, I said, well, can we go get more of that business? And that was a really easy business because that's B2B. Those were law firms and accounting firms and economics firms. They were already ordering catering every single day, 5 days a week. So all I had to do was go find them. Well, then I'm in the driver's seat. I'm in control, Michael. So I just spent all day on the phone calling every law firm in downtown Los Angeles, every accounting firm, every office with more than 50 employees. Eventually, I scaled it up. I hired data scrapers globally to collect this information so that we could reach out in an automated fashion. And before you know it, within 8 or 9 months, I had built just the catering side of the business to $1 million a year at a 30% margin.
And not focusing on it is a food hall and a street food business. It's actually, we just now catering.
We are now a catering operation with a storefront and a food hall.
But also that, I guess that is the big part of it, is letting go of your original idea and accept, where's the money?
In my core, I am a professional marketer. I have always had that discipline. That ideology has always resonated with me. So I've only been attached to outcome. I am objectively, just based on the results I've gotten from my client, I'm a great coach. I'm a great consultant. But it's not because I taught them all the things that I did that helped me win. It's because I helped them avoid all of the mistakes that I made along the way. We got rid of the trial and error, and now it's just a proven process. But like my success, I would say both as a coach and a consultant, as a media personality with these various shows, all of it has been based on my willingness to fail. It's when you adopt a marketer's outlook, you understand that marketing is an iterative process. So like, I don't care whether it works or not. I just care that I know whether it works or not. So I will try 1,000 different things. I will move faster than everyone else because I'm only attached to outcome. And as a result, I get to the end result that I desire faster than everyone else. And it's the first thing I condition in my clients. It's what I would argue that your audience should immediately do. If it's not working, move on. How many things, Michael, have you done in your own restaurant businesses and in your own consulting practice that took time to warm? Almost nothing, right? Like either it works or it doesn't. It's binary. Either you've achieved product market fit with this particular initiative or you have not. If I figure it out in 14 days, I'm going to can it. I don't care how much I spent on it. I don't care how long it took to implement it. And we get really good at implementing new ideas cheaper and faster as a result. And so I think that's the reason we win, because everything that I'm describing to you is not the nature of our industry. It's not how people operate. They spend 6 weeks planning to plan, then they spend 6 months on the plan, and then it takes them 6 weeks to roll it out. And we try and get it all done in 6 days.
Is it interesting? When do you know when to? I was asked this question some time ago, and I think it's interesting. You're just reminding me. When do you know that it's time to leave it? Because sometimes even the best program, the best advice can't save something that is fundamentally never going to get momentum. When do you know, as a entrepreneur, restaurateur, it's time to walk away?
From the concept entirely?
Yeah, from the concept or your idea, yeah?
Great question. I believe that all businesses, let's go ahead and oversimplify since we only have so much time. I think that every restaurant that is struggling for sales either has one of two issues. Either they have a product market fit issue or they have an awareness issue. Either everybody knows and nobody cares, or nobody knows, but if they knew, they would care. So I would ask you, does everybody know about your restaurant concept? And if they do, and you're slow, they don't care. There's a product market fit issue. Now, does that mean you need to throw the whole thing in the dumpster? No. But I have never helmed a rebrand, ever. What we found is when we look at somebody's menu, there are some outstanding hits, right? Like the top 10% of the menu accounts for 25% of sales, 50% of sales. So what we do is we go in and we re-engineer the entire offering based on what's doing well, and things turn around instantaneously. But like, you have to be sensitive to it. The fallacy is that you can create demand. It's the lie that we tell ourselves. But the truth is, if you are selling the best artisan bologna sandwiches in a vegan community, you're screwed. It's just not going to work. And so if everybody knows and no one cares, you need to reposition. There does need to be a pivot. But I would argue for most of the people listening, they don't have a product market fit issue. They have an awareness issue, to which they would turn to me and say, we've been around for years. To which I would say, no one gives a shit. Like, people don't know. I stood outside of my own bar, a block away from my bar that I owned for 11 years, Michael. I was 8 or 9 years into it. And I was introduced to a gentleman that had lived in the area for 2 years, a block and a half away from my bar, and had no idea who I was or what the bar was. Awareness is a massive hurdle. It is one of the biggest mistakes we make, is to underestimate how hard it is to be known in your community.
And it is quite interesting. I had a conversation with went live last week with a guy called Alex Smith, and he's really a marketeer like yourself. And he talked about nobody really cares about if your product is better. Better is not really something that's adding value to the marketplace. And he talks about, and people don't really have an understanding of what's better and bad, you know. So it's all washy-washy, exactly. So if you don't really deliver a huge value, you're not talking about that value to the marketplace, nobody knows who you are. And therefore, as you say, they don't know where to go and meet you or go and buy your product, because being better doesn't really matter in this world. Nobody cares.
Agreed. What it's about is about the specific use case. Are you timing it right? Are you talking to the people when they are most interested in what you have to say? Personally, I think that one of the biggest blights on our industry is this focus on acquisition. There's nobody that doesn't engage with me hoping to get new customers. Yeah. And it is always like the last thing on my list. New customers are expensive and they're hard to get because they've never been in, because they don't know you, because they don't like you, because they don't trust you. I am a retention guy. The question that I start with is, Michael, what happens to your restaurant if everyone that comes in once a month comes in twice a month? Everything changes, right? Yeah. You're rich. You're so rich. It solves all of your problems overnight. But nobody does that. I'll ask you a couple of more questions that I felt like created a paradigm shift in me, which is, how often do you think about your favorite restaurant? The one you don't own? Never. You never think about your favorite restaurant in the world, ever. And it's your favorite. It is your number one. And you never think about it because you're married, because you have kids, because you have a career, because you have a mother-in-law, because of all of these things. You never think about your favorite restaurant. Another question for you. What would your favorite restaurant in the world have to do to convince you to come back? Nothing. What's your favorite restaurant in the world? Do they have to give you free stuff? No. Do they have to give you a buy one, get one free? No, it's your favorite restaurant in the world. All they have to do is remind you that they exist. And I think that's where we all go wrong. I think if people took nothing away from this conversation, I hope they would understand that the people that love them most, that would be happy to give them money, 100% forgot that they exist. And so how does that inform your marketing? Well, instead of discounts and BOGOs and happy hours and all of these things that destroy the profitability in an industry where it's almost impossible to make a profit to begin with, the messaging changes. Now it's about, here's the owner. Here's our best-selling server. Here's us setting up for a catering event. Here's the effort that goes into our 36-hour boneless beef rib. Because you realize you don't have to sell. You just have to remind them that you exist and remind them why they love you.
What would you say, journey you've been on, setting up your programs? We're going to come back to the program in a moment. But what has been, where do you see the biggest problems are in the industry today? Because there's a lot have changed, When we talked last time, it was all about, how can you actually sell more online? How can you deliver food home to people? It was a very different world. But what are the big problems many restaurateurs are missing as you're looking at all these hundreds of different businesses that comes through your hands?
Here's the number one problem in our industry. The number one problem in our industry is most independent restaurant owners and operators cannot differentiate between more work and more money. And the reason is they look the same, right? Everybody wants more sales. So you slash your prices by 50% for happy hour, and now you're busier than shit, right? But are you making more work or are you making more money? You're making more work because you're not going to make any money off that margin. And I would argue that for decades now, there's been this race to the bottom because big chain restaurants will offer you 18 appetizers for $1.80 because they don't know the difference between more work and more money either. And it's driven everyone's prices down. It's driven these discounts, freebies, BOGO culture that we live in now. And I think that if everybody just took a sober look at their business and said, Do these initiatives create more work or do they create more money? Will I actually walk away with more money off this initiative? I don't believe in loss leaders. I don't believe in discounts. I don't believe in freebies. What I believe in is that you structure for profitability, and as a result, you profit. Profit is a plan. And so the way that we get there is we segment the business. So we have our dine-in business that we do, whether it's fast casual or whatever. Sometimes delivery is a component if it's fast casual or quick service. That is a segment of your business, but that business exists almost exclusively to promote your catering or events business. So if you're in full service, we're promoting events all day long at a 30% margin, or it's catering at a 25 to 35% margin all day long. Because when we transitioned from this idea that a restaurant is in the B2C business, meaning we take care of customers, to a B2B business, meaning we take care of businesses at scale, at margin, everything changed. Because like you as an individual, Michael, I can't convince you to come to my restaurant. And if I do and you don't want to, it's going to cost me a fortune, which ultimately results in more work, not more money for me. But if I go find out that a dozen law firms within 2 square miles of me are going to host holiday parties this year, and they haven't decided what venue they're going to host them in, that doesn't cost me anything. They're going to have the holiday parties no matter what. And by reaching out to them with world-class assets and making the process seamless for them, I'm actually helping them. I'm helping me, but I'm helping them too. This is what changed my businesses and changes the businesses of my clients. So to answer your question, it's this misconception that I will become profitable when I make X number of dollars. Everybody listening to this call was at $300,000 a month and knew once they hit $500,000 a month, they were going to be profitable. And then they hit 500 and the number was 550. And then it was 600 and then it was 700 because they're making more money at a worse margin. And so what we do is we work to make more money at a better margin at scale. I'm not trying to book $10,000 worth of individual transactions. I'm trying to book a $10,000 catering order.
And I think that comes back again. Like, well, there's two things to think about, Josh, and you can say disagree or what, but what I often see is that you want to be jack of all trades, you call it in England, where you want to do everything. You want to do delivery, you want to do catering, you want to do all these different things, and actually all your work, your time goes into managing these, and the cost just goes up, even though your revenue, your cost explodes in principle. And you can never actually be good at doing one thing really well. And I think your job as a business owner is finding out what is this business going to do one really, really well, and what is that one thing, and then just keep on doing that and automating that. And that's where you get product market fit at some point. But up to that, your job is only to find that.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that we need to lead with curiosity. And again, being unattached to everything other than outcome, it just makes it a lot easier to make those critical decisions. I had never aspired to become a professional caterer, but look back, hindsight's 2020. There are a sea of professional caterers that end up opening restaurants and going out of business because they're not used to the razor thin margins.
Yeah.
But there are so many restaurants that have dipped their toes into the catering waters or the private event waters and have thrived as a result. Because the margin is there, because everything's a pass-through, and because it is a predictable, controllable model. You can dial for dollars. You can create strategic referral programs with every event planner in your city. You can offer them higher commissions than everyone else because it's a pass-through to the client. You can make it work on your own terms, and it's just very hard to do in a B2C model.
Do you think that, I guess the opportunity is globally here, but do you think often that actually we as, let's just call it restaurateur or hospitality people we like to serve people, we like to make them feel special, but we're really bad at selling? we don't like that element of sales because we don't understand actually connecting with people is actually sales, but you actually need to have the ask, because that's what you're talking about as well. You need to go out and work with the things that are controllable and ask for the business in principle.
Sales feels gross to everybody. Even people, I'm really good at sales. Sales feels gross to me too. Nobody likes to sell their wares. But like that's the core of the business. And so I think that is more of a societal issue that I think is ingrained in us, that you should feel bad about selling your wares. And I think that the best way to get through that is twofold. Number one, to believe truly that you sell something of incredible value. That's it, right? That if you host your holiday party with me, if you allow us to cater this lunch, it will be a memorable experience because everything we do incredibly well. And if that's not true, then you can't really start selling until it is true. And then I think the second part of that is you got to get really comfortable with rejection. Really comfortable. I don't care how many no's I get. All I care about is that I'm able to figure out how many no's it's going to take to get to a yes. Because once I know that number, I'm in a much better place. Can I give you an example that kind of relates to this?
Yes, please do that, Josh.
So I've got this client, Daniel, in St. Simons, Georgia. He is the brilliant chef, and he is a chef, and he's a restaurateur. And one of the things I wanted him to do is I wanted him to start working on this B2B strategy to bring in more events. And so he hits me up and he's like, this is a waste of time. I don't want to do it. Everybody tells me no. And so I was like, all right, well, let's talk about what you've done over the last few weeks. I said, how much business have you closed? He was like, I closed $9,000 worth of events. And he was like, and I was like, how many people did you call? He's like, oh my God, so many. Dozens and dozens of people. And I only got $9,000 worth of events. I said, okay, how many hours did you work on it? And he goes, about 6. So let me get this straight. As a chef, you generated more than $1,000 an hour in revenue, sitting on your butt in an office, making phone calls. And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, I mean, what else could you do that would make you more money than that? And the truth is, nothing. And he got off the call and he was stoked. And now he makes calls all the time. And now his goal for this year, this is 2 years later, his goal this year is to take 6 consecutive weeks off. He wants to open another place because this one is highly profitable and he's barely working in it now. And what he said, I want to open another one. And I said, the only way you get to open another one is if you could take 6 weeks off without talking to anyone. And when you get back, it's better than you left it. So we set targets for cost of goods sold. We set targets for per customer average spend, all of this. And now he left. And now he's in the process of sitting on his butt, not answering the phone, waiting to see what happens for 6 weeks. But like, how exciting. And it sounds like he's the exception, but not the rule. But every time he got distracted with something else, I said, get back on the phone. Get back on the phone and dial for dollars. Because when he did this, he made so much money, he was able to hire a general manager from Olive Garden. Which you would say, I mean, does that really work in an independent concept? To which I would say, they work best in independent concepts. I think one of the other issues with our industry is that we have a tendency to try and hire people exactly like ourselves. Instead of trying to hire people with a complementary skill set. What Daniel actually wants is someone that doesn't innovate. Someone that knows how to follow a proven plan.
The integrator, the visionary and the integrator we talked about last time, I think.
Absolutely. Someone that can just work your plan once you figured out that your plan works. And so he brought in a general manager from Olive Garden. Now, does he want to have a beer with the guy every night? No. Are they best friends? No. Are they on this entrepreneurial journey together? No. But Daniel's on that entrepreneurial journey, and he can step away from his restaurant because he knows it's in good hands. Because it's not that this guy possesses the same skills as Daniel, it's that he possesses different skills that are more applicable to the role. Daniel would have never been a great general manager. Not for that restaurant, not for any restaurant. He's an entrepreneur in his heart. And so as a result, he brought in someone that could fill that need in his restaurant.
And in principle, what he learned was falling in love with the most important job he needed to do, was picking up the phone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think, I know you're very well read. A guy that I love is Naval Ravikant. And one of the things that he talks about is high leverage activities. And so, everyone wants to prize the restaurateur that's running to the back and doing the dishes in the scullery, or running up to the checkout stand to take over the register. That's low leverage. You take over that register, you work it for 2 hours. How much money did you bring in for the business? How much money could you have brought in for the business if you were at a corporate mixer, or if you were dialing for dollars? So what I try and focus on in my own life, in my own business, in my own evolution as a restaurant, as an entrepreneur, is the same that I do for my restaurateurs, which is we try and figure out what are the highest leverage behaviors that they can take, and then they just focus maniacally on that.
You built the program, the 5-day challenge, which you run consistently every month. What has been, the biggest aha moment as you're building this 5-day challenge, where you actually get a taste of what it means to get a profitable business?
That's a great question. Here's what I'll tell you. And I think this goes towards taking your own medicine, and it goes back to everything we just discussed. So sales feels dirty. It feels like shit. And so the typical model for our industry, or for all industries as it relates to sales, coaching, and consulting, is this. It is that you push ads, or you come on podcasts like this, and then you push everyone to a sales call. And in the sales call, you make the promise that, this is going to be a free 1-hour coaching session, and I'm going to teach you everything you need to know. But that's not what it is. It is a sales call. It is a sales call built around showing you all of the flaws in your logic and in your business so that you feel helpless. And then I give you a lifeline. This was my sales model for the first 6 months to a year. And the reason is because that's the industry standard. That's what you do. That's what I was taught to do. So I did it, and it worked. Got a bunch of clients off of it. But I also walked away from many, many, many calls, understanding that the person that I was talking to either could not afford the training, or wasn't going to take enough away from the call to really impact their business. Like, I'm good, Michael. You are too. I can only do so much in an hour. Yeah. And so I felt like I wasn't honoring the commitment. And so I went on this search. I was like, what is the thing that I can do that honors my commitment, that gets me out of sales and puts me back in the driver's seat in what I want to do, what I feel like I'm called to do, which is coach, which is teach. And then I came across this concept of a 5-day challenge. And I was like, I love this. So here's how it works. Over the course of 5 days, I teach people exactly the same exact stuff that I teach in my program. Step by step by step. It is not high level. It is granular. I walk everyone through all of it. And at the end of it, a handful of people that have the capital to do it get the opportunity to move forward in the program. And so for everyone that doesn't have the money to do it, they get the opportunity to learn for free for 5 days. They still get the basis of the program. They get all of the fundamentals. They just have to execute it on their own. And so what I ended up creating through the 5-day challenge was this masterclass where I win no matter what, where the stakeholders, the people that are involved in the challenge, win no matter what. There is no sales call. There is no pitch. By and large, most people midway through the challenge are already reaching out. Those that are capitalized and are in the position to do so want to know, how can I move forward faster? And so that is what it's built off of.
And if you go for those 5 days, what kind of transformation could you get out of that, even if you didn't sign on to the further program? Because I think, you have to spend, is it 5 full days or it's...
No, it's 1 hour a day for 5 days.
Yeah, so you have to be committed for 5 hours in a week, yeah?
Yeah, a little bit more than that. I would say that, there's also homework every night.
Okay.
So if you do the homework, you immediately begin to make more money. In theory, if you do the homework all 5 days, you've already paid for the program by the 5th day. That's the idea. So here are a few things that I think come out of the 5-day challenge. Number one, if you show up for all 5 days, you've proved to yourself that you can spend at least 5 hours a week working on your business, not in it. Number two, I don't think that most of us graduated from the top of our class at Cornell University. I think most of us that own or operate restaurants ended up there because we're like busboys that found financing, right? And so when you become a restaurateur, typically you don't behave as one. I didn't. I reverted back to what I had done the day before I opened my restaurant, which was I was a restaurant manager. So I did the things that restaurant managers do, not the things that restaurant owners do. So over the course of the 5 days, I teach you what restaurant owners do. And then we literally re-engineer your business. We rework your menu for profitability. I give you the tactics, tools, and strategies you need to scale your per customer average spend, not just giving you the tools, but giving you the scripting you would use for your teams. We optimize your floor plan. We optimize your inventory in terms of tables and chairs. I give you a bunch of tactics to double sales on peak on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. I give you the formula to diversify revenue streams so that you can begin to work on that B2B strategy to scale your catering and events business. And then we focus on new customer acquisition and customer frequency.
And one of the biggest results you've seen people come out with when they do the 5-day challenge, and then of course they can pay for the program, but then they go on the journey with you. What is some of the transformations you see on the long term end? Because there's of course 5 days or 8 hours, let's just say 8 hours. If you can pay for the program, that's a great start and you follow it. But then what is exactly the ultimate outcome you can achieve? Now we're talking about we need to achieve outcomes here when you've done the full program.
Right, absolutely. There are 3 outcomes we focus on maniacally. The first is financial freedom. We start out literally on day 1 of the challenge, or if you move forward with the program, we do an annual planning call. And the first question we ask is, how much money do you want to make personally? Which is the last question anyone thinks about, right? But the business isn't going to work for you until you put yourself in the driver's seat. And that starts with, how much money do I want to make? Which is very easy for you to figure out. And then once you have, we reverse engineer that outcome. Mike, if you want to make $150,000 a year with your single unit restaurant, what needs to be true? Right? Well, either you need to make $1.5 million a year at a 10% margin, or you need to make less than that at a 15% margin. I'm not going to do public math for you. But once we reverse engineered the outcome, then we say, well, okay, what does the per customer average spend need to be? What does this need to be? What does that need to be? So we architect, we plan for financial freedom as defined by the individual sitting across from me. The second thing is freedom of time. I think that it is incredibly difficult to live a fulfilling life working 80 to 100 hours a week, even if that is what you are doing and you're doing only things that you love.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be more time available for other things that interest us outside of the restaurant. So once we've achieved financial freedom, or at least once we're on the path, we can then easily afford a world-class leader. And so we have training programs built around finding the person, nurturing them, and then offloading your workload to them using the delegate and elevate model. And so once we've given you freedom of time, then it's about freedom from overwhelm, which honestly is part and parcel with the rest of it. I would argue you probably get freedom from overwhelm before you get freedom of time and financial freedom. Because once you're working a proven plan, things just get easier.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I've learned through the years is as soon as you talked about the momentum in the beginning, and you talked about not enough gas in the tank, how many of us that's listening haven't been there or maybe are there sometimes. But actually, when you get that systemized and that overwhelmed, then you can actually start looking at the ultimate outcome you want, and you can actually start having the headspace to make the right decision or stop doing something that doesn't work, because you can actually see it with clarity, because you're not overwhelmed, or you're not working 80 hours, you are working maybe 40 hours, which should be the name of the game in any job or business.
But do you see why it starts with how much money you want to make and why that's so important? And because, I mean, even for myself, so do I make less money because I run a challenge as opposed to ads to a sales call with the sales team? Absolutely. I could double, triple, 10x revenue simply by hiring a bunch of sales reps and pushing out more ads. It's not what I want to do, because there's a very specific amount of money I want to make. And so understanding that, I also know that I can spend more time with my clients, because I only take on 6 clients a month, because it's all I need to make the amount of money that I want to make. Could I bring on 7? Could, but I'm not. You see how everything changes when you know how much money you want to make. You are then able to re-engineer your life around this specific outcome. It also makes it really easy for me to determine, and it makes it easy for my restaurant clients to determine what is an opportunity versus what is a distraction. So when that new developer comes out and says, hey, we'd love for you to drop your restaurant concept in here, you already know whether that's on your roadmap or not. Ari has a great story about this, how Disney came to him and offered him arguably $1 kajillion to open a Zingerman's in downtown Disney. And he immediately said, no, we don't do that. We don't open businesses outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan. To which they said, you don't understand. This is a lot of money. To which he said, I don't think you understand. We're not doing it. And he said, I didn't think twice about it. And he didn't think twice about it because he already had a plan in place. He already knew what winning looked like. And so I think probably the biggest take home, and people get this on day one, is just clarity around what winning looks like for you. And then we reverse engineer that outcome, and we ignore anything that falls outside of it.
And that's super interesting, because that's what I call clarity of purpose and direction. And Zingerman's, they have the visioning statement. I've talked with Ari about it. And we actually did, I think since we talked last time, we did this white paper about the 7 tenets of hospitality mavericks. And the first thing they all do, no matter what, and they do this to excellence, is have absolutely clarity of what you call, what does great look like, or what does winning look like? What does the ultimate outcome of this organization look like? And therefore they say yes to the right thing or no to the wrong thing. And one of the things that stands in the visioning from Ari is that we operate businesses in Ann Arbor. And now it's also becoming a business that should be owned by the employees, not Amazon. They're very specifically, we're not going to sell to Amazon. It's off the radar. So they don't even have to consider it if the offer is there. You know, it stands in the rules and the governance that we're not going to make that decision.
It's a firm line in the sand. And I think that it serves us all really well. Here's what I can tell you. I am 500 plus episodes in on Full Comp. And I would love to tell you that, so everybody I have interviewed is objectively successful. They all have great businesses. But I would be lying if I told you that all 500 of those people know how they became successful. Or why they're successful. Because there's a handful, probably 10 to 15%, that as I'm interviewing them, and you know how granular I like to get, they have no idea. You know, I'll be like, you know, why do you think you're so successful? Well, you know, it's because we focus on quality of food and service. To which I would say, restaurants with great food and great service close every single day of the week. That's not true. That might be part of it.
Back to nobody cares about quality.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are table stakes at this point in such a competitive industry. But I would say that for the vast majority of the people I've interviewed, they live with intention. They think before they act, and they know exactly what the outcome they're looking for is. Back to what I was saying about thinking like a marketer. I know the outcome that I'm looking for. So if I run something and I don't get that outcome, I just quit. I'm a big quitter, you know, and then I move on to something that ultimately will.
Yeah, and you also accept when you start out with a new thing, it might not give the outcome, but I know what the outcome is. So I'm just going to stop. I will come back to what we talked about when it's enough. And I
Right.
think too many people, we all done it. We stay in things too long, and it's not giving the outcome we want. And it's funny enough, the also with the financial freedom number you start out with, that's what I've seen. Often people start very high, and then the more experience you get, you have to find out actually I can actually lower that, because actually freedom is not all these things; it's the time you talked about before as well. And when do you get to a point where you can just have that time to do
Well,
what you
that
want to
would be my
do?
point.
Yeah.
If most restaurateurs made $1 million a year, but they worked 80 to 100 hours a week, what's the money worth if you can't spend it?
Yeah. And don't have anyone to spend it with because they
Sure.
leave you because you're not present.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
what is like, so they live with intention? Is there like other learnings? Because one of my questions was, and I think we're just going to stick with this right now, that from all these people you've interviewed, it's incredible people. You have Wilke Guerra, you have Ari Weinswijk, we both have the pleasure of interviewing a number of times. But is there other like, behaviors, patterns, principles you see that comes out of these 10-15%, the greats, the mavericks, I call them?
For me, I've never concerned myself with math. And the successful people are obsessed with it.
Mm.
Absolutely obsessed with it. I can't tell you truthfully that I measured footfall in any of the places that I opened, or that I looked for unmet demand and then built something that I thought would work really well in this underserved market. I just built what I wanted in places that I liked, and hope for the best. And I think that's what most of us do. But if you're going to achieve any level of scale, it requires that. It requires you to know how many people are going to walk by, how many residents are in proximity to your place, whether people that patronize the restaurants in the area live in the area or work in the area. I never concerned myself with available parking and things like that. And it's a mistake. It's one of the first things I do with my clients today. You plan for how much money you're going to make. And you plan from a worst case, best case scenario. And that to me is the end all be all. It's one of the first things we do with your business is we say, it's a $500,000 business today. It's $1 million business today. It's a $1.5 million business today. Where could it be in 12 months? Okay, show me that. Show me a business that's doing $3 million in your area. Let's look at that. Let's analyze that as a case study to see how we need to adjust your business model to begin to absorb some of that market share. And most people don't think in those terms. I didn't think in those terms until I started having to fix problems on the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
But like once you do, you realize, like, can you run a business based off the numbers, never having stepped foot in that restaurant? And I can tell you objectively, yes, I can. I think we all can. We just need to get really comfortable with the idea that our jobs as founders, as owners, is to set the vision and then attach all of our goals to numbers that we're able to track in real time.
Yeah, and I think that's, lots of founders actually start out with the journey you've been on, and then actually, if they want to become great, they start to use the numbers. Like let's use Singerman's. So Singerman's has what you call open book management, the great game of business, Jack Stack. They have this system for how to measure money. So money is actually a very big thing. And lots of people, when I talk to them, they have this feel about Singerman exactly, oh, well, it's all on purpose, and Ari and all the stories he tells. Yes, that's a very big part of it, but it's backed up by numbers.
It is.
They stop doing things if it doesn't really dribble down on the bottom line. And the whole organization work like that. They are business people, all of them. They're not just employees or restaurateurs. They are business people.
Well, and I also think that one of the mistakes that so many of us make, myself included, is focusing on the wrong numbers. So there are leading indicators and there are lagging indicators. So like people want to focus on everything from top line revenue to customer frequency. And they want to say, like, let's track these things and figure out how they're improving. But like your revenue can go up simply by scaling your per customer average spend. Your per customer average spend is a leading indicator. I had a client increase his per customer average spend by $1 and change, well below $2. And it translated to an extra $100,000 a year in top line revenue.
Yeah.
Right? But had he just focused on top line revenue, he wouldn't have been focused on the drivers that are going to get that done. Customer frequency is the same way. We don't focus on customer frequency because customer frequency is a lagging indicator. What we focus on is how often we message our repeat customers. Because what we found is the more we message them, or the more we message them with more compelling content, the more likely they are to come in. And so we're able to increase customer frequency and increase revenue by focusing on the drivers that ultimately impact those numbers.
Yeah, again, it's back to what you said earlier. What are you in control of and what are you not in control of? That's a number you actually can impact every day in a way, and you can make it very clear. You can say that measurement is very clear, and it's not difficult to figure out. One of the things I wanted to ask you about as well is that, lots of people in our industry talks about, the experience of creating when people then come to the restaurant, and then, it's important to create this experience that makes people, come again and again. Customer loyalty, as you talked about as well. Who is your 1,000 fans? Are we starting to lose that knack, the art of hospitality? There's like, people are now starting to talk about that we actually got, too stripped back because of the pandemic and all the things that happened. We're forgetting about creating experiences that actually makes our customers come back. Is that part of the problem as well? It's not just a sales and positioning and a marketing problem.
It's funny you mentioned that. So I get questions from audience members of Full Comp. And typically I would reply back to them via email. And someone asked this question recently. And what I decided to do was make it public. So once a week on Thursdays, I launch office hours, which is where on the podcast, it's a dedicated episode to me just answering one person's question. And someone said, I really want to scale the profitability of my business. How could I adjust our hospitality model to offer world-class hospitality so that we can do this thing? To which I said, I think that profitability comes before hospitality. I think that one doesn't lead to the other unless they're in the right order. I think that one of the reasons you're seeing a diminished hospitality experience is because restaurant owners are scrambling. I think that you can improve your hospitality experience, and if you need to charge more to do it, you do it. But is that your core business? There's a deli right down the street from my house that I absolutely love. They will remain unnamed because what I'm going to say isn't positive. They're perpetually short-staffed, perpetually. And it's because they're not paying enough and they can't afford to pay more than they're already paying. But it's a deli. So I don't go there for hospitality. I go there for lunch. And so I think that we can redefine what hospitality looks like. If this particular deli had tablets on the table that I could order from and not speak to anyone, I'm good with it. They're not actually in the hospitality business. It might be a full service restaurant, but that's not the use case. That's not what people are using it for. What they want is a lunch. And so if I can get my lunch 10 minutes faster by not having to wait for a waitress that is overwhelmed, I'm good with it. So I think that what we're seeing is this transition. There's like a fork in the road. And I think that restaurants are trying to figure out, am I a hospitality business? Is this a service-based business? Or am I in the manufacturing business? Like, nobody's upset that Chipotle is using robots to make food. All they want is a burrito. That's it. And so if you can scale back the time that it takes to give me a burrito by 5 minutes by having a robot do it, great. Email me. Have a great day, Josh. Or don't email me at all. That would be even better. So in full service, I believe that in this fork in the road, that we're going to need to start charging commensurately to give people great hospitality. So do I see it diminished? Yes. And it's because I think that in this fork, most people are still sitting in the middle, when they need to clearly define what they are and then charge accordingly. If Chipotle's got all robots, they should charge less, and the ticket time should be much faster. If I'm going to a full service restaurant, they should charge me significantly more. And as a result, I should have a way better experience.
So what you're saying is, in principle, as a restaurateur or business person or entrepreneur, you actually have to decide on which end of the scales are you. Are you the experience?
You probably already know. I mean, even though I don't think anyone has probably articulated it in that way, like, you know what you are. You should know the core. You should know the core of your business. South City Fried Chicken, my fast casual concept, it was transactional. When we first opened, we took fine dining standards and we put it in a fast casual model, and it exploded. Not in a good way, in an awful way, because it took 20 minutes to get your fried chicken sandwich.
Yeah.
And people hated us for it because they weren't coming to get a fried chicken sandwich. They were coming to get a fried chicken sandwich on their lunch break, and they had 10 minutes to get it.
Yeah.
And so everything changed as a result. We figured out we're not in the service-based business. We're not dropping fine dining standards into this culinary process. What we are going to do is we are going to do our absolute best to get you the absolute best as quickly as is humanly possible. You know, and so understanding our core business gave us the ability to meet the expectations of the customers that patronized us.
And you can see again, if you take Danny Meyer as a great example. He took Shake Shack and actually divided that from the other part of the business and said, this is a totally different business model. That's not the fine dining, the upper end experience kind of thing. Therefore, it needs a different focus. And I think that's a great example.
Kiosks, right? And they have kiosks, and they have service, and they have people walking around asking if they can refill your soda. I mean, he's figured out what that sweet spot is for his business. And Shake Shack's not particularly cheap.
Nope.
Right? And they just came out. They were one of the only, I think they were the only restaurant in their tier that came out on their quarterly reports saying they were not going to reduce prices. They were not going to discount.
Yeah.
And so it just goes to show that, like, people will pay. They're just not paying you. And it's because you failed to qualify your price relative to your service model. But when it is crystal clear, Shake Shack is a beautiful example of this. You can charge $18 for a burger, fries, and a drink, and people won't flinch.
And also because it's a consistent experience. Again, they consistently found that thing that meeting people's expectation when they come in, as you say. And I think often what you are the founder wants to sell of experience and expectation is not matching what the customer is coming from, and you have to adapt when you see that, or you have to be that eyes that wide open and able to take that in and accept that you were wrong and move on.
Look, we talk about expansion all the time in my group, and I advocate for two scenarios. Either do whatever you want to do, however you want to do it, but then you have to find a market that's interested in that. Or if you like the market you're in and you want to stay in that market, you've got to do whatever they want you to do. Those are the only two options.
How is AI going to play into this, Josh? What is your view on that?
I'm deep in AI. Like, I love it. I just hosted a 3-day intensive with my clients around it. And I'll tell you what we talked about and what I trained them on. So I believe that over the next 5 years, what you're going to see is that restaurateurs that adopt AI today will have an overwhelming competitive advantage against those that do not. AI doesn't replace anything, but it amplifies your ability to execute. Imagine getting twice as much done in the same amount of time. So I'll share how we use it. So the first is that we're able to use AI to independently evaluate what we spend our time on. Using it to effectively delegate. We then have a method that we use to create SOPs using AI. We record a conversation, we transcribe that conversation. That's loaded into a custom AI model for our restaurants. That then gives them perfect SOPs. Then they're able to delegate all of these tasks out, because that's really the hurdle. I think that the hurdle with delegation isn't not having people to delegate to. It's not knowing how to delegate the thing. So AI is fantastic for that when you give it the right inputs. Now we freed up some of your time. So how should you spend your time? What we do for our clients is we build a custom GPT. So that is a version of Chat GPT, that's the platform we prefer, that knows everything there is to know about your business. From like your brand to your goals to the founding. It's internalized all of your SOPs. It's internalized all of your training materials. It's gone online and analyzed your reviews. It's gone online and analyzed your competitors' reviews so that it knows how you sit in competition to others. And then we use all of that in that custom GPT to build out a marketing strategy. And it's built out so simply. And this is why the investment, and it's an investment in time, not money, because a premium ChatGPT account costs $20 a month. Yeah. We've set it up so that it automatically prompts the user to say, what do you want to talk about this month? And it will give them 3 things. The restaurant owner will type in 3 things it wants to talk about this month. And it will supply them with their monthly email, proposed social media posts in their voice, based on their language, with hashtags optimized for their audience. And then check this out, in a shot list. So if this is what you're going to do, this is the photography and videography you need to capture in order to get it done. And then they're able to take that and give that to someone else and say, here's the shot list, go capture that information. They turn to a VA that they got for $8 an hour through Upwork, and they say, go ahead and populate our social media platform with these posts. Like you can amplify what you can do. And so if you do that every 2 days for 30 days, you now have ostensibly 15 months worth of content in process. Like who's able to get that far ahead? No one. But the restaurateurs that are doing it have the ability to do so.
Yeah, and I think really it's interesting. It's about how do you create this, I call it often, I use the phrase second brain in a way, because it can actually take some of this offload, the overwhelm away from you again. But you have to put some time in, but what you get back is incredible, because the days where you are a bit stuck and you can ask them, the chat GPT, whatever you call your friend, the AI, you actually suddenly can still get momentum. Because suddenly there's somebody to talk with and actually just throw your ideas into it. And that's what's really powerful. And I think it's going to just get faster and faster. And
it is. Bro, we built out across multiple cohorts, we built out 60 custom chat GPTs in 1 hour. In 1 hour. That fast. And again, with competitive analysis of reviews and positioning, with all of your verbiage. It had analyzed not only their social media, but their engagement on social media, right? These are the posts that perform best for you. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible what you can do. Email subject lines optimized for open rates, right? And it's all in your voice. It's all in your brand. It's the next level. It really is. And so I believe that what you're going to see over the next 5 years is not the restaurateurs that refuse to adopt it. I don't think that they're going to fall behind. I think they're going to be replaced.
Yeah. They're not going to be here in principle. No. What have been a significant learning you've done over the last 2 years would have led to a change of belief or habit or, and greatly influenced, how you do things today?
There are things that I do that I would prefer not to do, but they can only come from me. But I have been able to successfully offload 99% of the things that anyone can do to someone else. My schedule is relatively clear, and everything that I do all revolves around one thing. I just teach. That's all I do for a living, is I just teach. And there was a time that I taught and sold, and I don't do that anymore. Now I just teach. I believe that once we figure out what we were put on this planet to do, we can re-engineer our entire lives around that. And not say that it doesn't come with struggle and sacrifice. And certainly not that there aren't seasons in my life where I am incredibly overwhelmed with what the next restructure, what the next evolution of my career looks like. but I'm always able to go back to what matters most. I, like many of my clients, ended up very much addicted to chaos. Like when it's going well, you break it. And the reason you break it is because it's more interesting. And I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with over the years that were in the same exact position I was, which was when everything was going well, we were miserable. Creates crisis.
Yeah.
What am I going to do with myself? I'm not even needed at the restaurant on a Saturday night anymore, you know? And what I can tell you is that figuring out what I was born to do and restructuring my entire life around only doing that, doing it for myself first and then doing it with my clients, has been a massive paradigm shift. In terms of recent learnings, I just read a book called Come Up for Air. And the book is about email and text message and Slack messages and all of these different things that pull our distraction. And as it turns out, and it was one of those few books like Traction where I read it and I was like, my God, I've just been thinking about everything wrong. The book was incredible in terms of helping me figure out how to use email in a way that works for me. Because email is very conversational. It's very back and forth, but then you live in your inbox as a result, and that's not what it was intended to do. And so the lessons that the book teaches around symmetrical and asymmetrical communication was fascinating to me. I would recommend it to everyone that feels like they struggle with their inbox.
Yeah, I actually ordered the book after we talked last time, and it's actually I haven't started reading yet, but I just had a glimpse because I'm very much trying to finish books I'm reading, because I also was suddenly reading 5 books and no learnings comes out of that. But yeah, that's the next one that comes after the book I'm reading right now. That actually there's how to actually become your best self, which is around how do you actually change the belief system around yourself.
Sure.
And because I think actually we are in a time in the world, as you say as well, where we have the opportunity to absolutely build the life we want to have, the perfect life around ourselves, but we have to be willing to change and throw out some old paradigms about how the world works. Are you going to ever run a restaurant again? Now you have all this knowledge, it would be
Still
tempting.
do a little bit. So I do just a little bit of on-site consulting every year, probably about 2 months worth, where clients request that I come in and actually implement these things on site for them. And that's enough for me. For me, what my life is about now is it's about always returning to that, because it reinforces why I love the industry so much. It also gives me the opportunity to, in real time, try things on my own, not through my clients, but through my own efforts, to make sure that I still got the juice, to make sure that I could still walk in and change everything. Tomorrow, I fly out to Las Vegas to do it for 5 days. And it's very exciting to be able to do that. Would I ever go back to being a full-time restaurateur? No, I don't believe that was my calling. I think that I have always been a professional servant. And I think that what I did was I transitioned from serving my community to serving my industry. And Michael, there's just something to be said for becoming the solution that you had desperately hoped for in your own life.
Yeah. And also it's becoming the best version of what you can become using your super skills, because that's really going to make impact in the world. And it's a difficult journey to get on. And you probably already now are building the 4.0 in your mind. That's going to have the next step. A totally different question, which is quite interesting. I was thinking about you with all the different food concepts you've been. Well, what is the this was actually a guest that asked me this question recently when I did an interview. What is your fondest food memory? What you got really excited when you think back? This is the moment when you were eating food where you really were ecstatic about things in your life.
In terms of flavor, or in terms of like just the dining experience?
The total experience,
I'll give you one. It's going to seem odd, but it is definitely, when I look at my entire life and I think about like a food experience that had like one of the deepest impressions on my life. I was at Chick-fil-A, the fast food joint. I'm 45 years old. I have eaten at Chick-fil-A one time in my entire life. And this experience came from the one time I ate inside of a Chick-fil-A. So I'm there with my wife and my daughter, and we're sitting at Chick-fil-A. And instead of giving her a toy, they gave her these cards. And the cards were questions for parents to ask their children. And I must tell you, just in having that little dining experience with her, I learned more about her through the questions that were presented on the card, which was amazing. But then in the middle of this amazing experience and getting to know my daughter better, thank you, Chick-fil-A, one of the people that worked there walked up and said, can I refill your drink for you? What was it? And like, I clutched my pearls. I was beside myself. Because I just didn't expect that standard of care in a fast casual. I mean, have you ever been in a McDonald's and they were like, hey, can I get your refill, dude? Never. And it was such a simple gesture, but it just went so far above and beyond my expectations for that experience. And it stuck with me. And how much did those cards cost Chick-fil-A to manufacture? Pennies, per unit. And how much effort and money did it take for that guy to offer to refill my drink? None. And so it always comes back to the same thing for me, which is if we want to be memorable, if we want to run amazing concepts that people remember fondly, they tell other people about, I think that it's about exceeding expectations in the ways that people don't anticipate. And that's what Chick-fil-A did for me.
Yeah, I love that. I love that memory. I actually thought you would come up with some kind of high-end dining experience, but I thought I would do that myself. And mine was actually eating together with my friends every year in the first week of December. Yeah, that's like one of my founders' moments. And it doesn't matter how bad the food is; it's just
certainly not
bunch. Last question: what's the one question you wished I've asked you? What would it be, and what would you answer?
That's a really good one. What was my biggest professional regret? What was the biggest mistake I made in my career?
And what was that?
Chasing the money. Every time I have ever tried to make money, I have failed. Every time I orchestrated a business around, we're going to do this and then we're going to do that. And as a result, we're going to be rich. I failed. And it failed because it was not rooted in the right intention. Whenever I built a business that I would have patronized myself, whenever I built a business that I loved so much, I would work there for free. The money came. Now, how I spent that money, right? How we structured the business around making sure that we would continue to make more money is a different conversation. But what I found was you don't chase money. You chase glory. And if you're willing to do what you do, if you end up doing what you would do for free every day of your life, success is inevitable. So much of success is not quitting. And most people fail because they quit, and they quit because they're doing something for the wrong reasons. That was my biggest aha.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting when you talk about when you chase the money, it also feels like you're failing. But when you're doing what you love, if it's podcasting, because podcasting is quite hard, we know that, you're just falling short. And when you're falling short, you can do something about it. You can put something in place. Love that.
Bro, I've got great sponsors for the show. And if everybody pulled out tomorrow, I'd still do the show. I would do it for free. If I hit the lottery tomorrow, would I still do the challenge every month? And would I still run the restaurant scaling system program? I would. I love it. I love it. It fills my cup. It's what I was called to do. And so as a result, how could it not thrive?
Love it. Great place to end. Where can people connect with you? Learn more about the 5 Days channel, whatever else there's worth. Full comp, of course, we'll put that in the show notes.
Yes, sir. If they just go to joshkopel.com They're going to get all of it. They can register for the next 5-day challenge. They can check out my favorite episodes of the podcast. There are a bunch of tactics, tools, and strategies they can download for free. It's a ton of stuff.
What was your favorite episode?
Of Full Comp?
Mm?
Oh, that's so hard.
Almost unfair. I know that.
Almost unfair. Okay, I'll tell you though. So my favorite episode of Full Comp was I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Warren Rustand. Warren Rustand. I'll give you the link to the episode so you can drop it in the show notes.
Yeah.
His model for how to lead with intentionality and how to create a life worth living. He is literally the most successful human being on every level that I've ever met in my life. And he has this story that he shares in the episode about serendipity that literally will bring you to tears. There haven't been that many conversations in my life that have just completely transformed my worldview, and that was one.
Great place to end. Sorry there was an extra question there, but I just thought it was so obvious we needed to ask that.
It's great.
Sending you and the whole team and the people that's in your groups all the power and energy you need to have to make significant impact on the world.
Thank you.